You've heard of heroic labs by now, and we keep talking about them because you need every edge to be successful in today's market. Heroic Labs game stack is built like a brick house. You got the Nakama, their backend game server, Hero, their game development framework, Satori, their live op service, and last but not least, Heroic Cloud to provide massive scalability. Heroic Labs is a battle-tested partner, and their tech enables you to be flexible, creative, and scale for success. Focus on your game, avoid tech risks, grow your product with scalable live ops, and save a big chunk of cheese, all with Heroic Labs.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good to see you all here. How many of you listen to the Deconstructor of Fun podcast? Okay, so a good amount.
Raise your hand, Joseph.
What about, you should come up and be the honorary other person. So JK was a founding member of this podcast. And so, yeah. Well, and you can just yell. We don't have a mic for you, but yeah, come up. Oh, you'll figure it out. This is what's great. Oh, yeah. Also, we have a special guest who is not on the podcast, but is here, Matt with 1T, who is representing himself and not his company. So I want to make sure about that. But I'll let you introduce yourself in just a second. So let me tell you what we're up to today, because this is not your typical panel, thank God. We're going to make this interactive. And so if you're familiar at all with our podcast and how it works, we talk about all the game industry news, we break it down, we distill it every week. People listen in and just have a fun time with it. So what people like about the podcast most when I ask is we fight. And by fight, I mean we have healthy disagreements because all of us represent different disciplines within the gaming industry. Kress is strategy, Laura's product. I pretend to do marketing. Admon, right? And then JK is just a knower of all things and builder of shooting games in India. And also has an amazing podcast, Game Makers, and newsletter. If you don't follow that, you should, because it's awesome. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of a live version of the podcast. It's designed to be more of a discussion. And so as we go through some of the topics, and basically what we're doing is breaking down what we heard today across all of the different conferences, I'll kind of throw out a different topic. Raise your hand if you want to participate and get on the fun. It's like an interactive version of the podcast. So please know that this is designed to be, we're all one team, one dream here together. So I'm Jen Donahoe. I'm a strategic marketing consultant for Jade Inferno and Beta Hat. And today we have Eric Kress. Well, you introduce yourselves.
Eric, I am a consultant, so I consult for investors primarily on trading the publicly traded names. But I also consult industry, so like Warner Brothers and others, on product and product strategy. My job is basically looking at things from a 30,000 feet view and, screaming from the cheap seats. That's kind of my role in the gaming ecosphere.
He's the villain on the podcast?
I'm the mean one, yes.
Yeah. I'm Laura Taranto. For the podcast, I mostly cover casual. I especially cover puzzle because I love puzzle games. I think they deserve more credit than they get. Yeah, and on my, my side hustle, and just kidding, my main job, I work for Big Fish, and I was working a little bit on new games, and now I'm helping out with some publishing titles.
Yes. And so in my world, I led marketing teams at EA, Zynga, Scopely, EA, Riot. Oh, wait, I said the EA twice. So I work with a lot of game companies in that regard. And so as a consultant, I get a chance to see things across so many different companies, which is really fun after having worked at all of the big guys. But special guest.
Thanks, Jen, and nice to meet everybody. Nice to meet you,
Good
Matt
to meet
Harris.
you too. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Let's see, I run product management for Activision Blizzard Media. I've been there for about almost 2 years now. In March, it'll be 2 years. I've been putting ads on the internet for a very long time, so you're welcome for the free internet that I and my ads have been providing all this time. Started putting ads on the internet in about 2007. I had an ad agency, which we started to dabble in ad tech. We ended up building a video advertising platform. Didn't really go very far, but it launched my product management career. I ended up moving to California from Austin and joined in Moby. And I've been working mostly in mobile ads for the last 15 years, call it. Most recently, I was at Google for a short amount of time. And before that, I was at Meta, responsible for Facebook Audience Network and a handful of other products for app developers and various monetization things. So
It's really unfortunate that we could not find somebody with more experience. Apologies for that. JK, how can I help you?
Yeah, so Joseph Kim, some people who listened to the podcast earlier know me as JK, but currently building a studio out of India, working on an extraction shooter game, as well as a dating simulation game for India. It's very challenging. Turns out game development is not as easy as you would think. So I have been struggling for many years.
Shocking. Making games is hard. I think, how many times do we hear that during the course of the day? Okay, so the first topic of the day was pretty fun. It was unfiltered growth, and Mike said something that really resonated with us, which was, this monetization model sucks. And what he meant by that was the idea that in the world of UA, we show ads to gamers inside of our games for other games. So he comes from the world of entertainment, where you can imagine you don't watch CBS and see an ad for an NBC show on CBS, or you don't go into McDonald's and see an ad for a Whopper. So for him, coming in new to the industry, his mind was just blown of like, why on earth do we inside of our own games let other people advertise their games inside of, I don't understand. So that's kind of the first topic, because it's really kind of triggered Kress of like, oh my God, that is just such a weird way to think about what has become our industry. So you go first. Like, what were your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts on the panel, just to be as frank feedback as I always give, is they spent the first 35, 40 minutes saying nothing. And then it started getting real, with the exception of Josh, who's I think here somewhere. Here's Tom. Anyway, he was dropping F-bombs, which I really do appreciate. I swear I just saw him. So yeah, when he came out, Mike said, look, this business kind of sucks. Like, yes, that's true. It's a really tough business, and that's what, it's UA arbitrage, and you spend money to make money, and that's the business, and everything creative is kind of in lieu of that, and that's a really challenging business to be in, particularly if you are from traditional media. There's Josh.
There's Josh. Oh, you just missed it.
Thanks, Josh. The shout out. Thanks for dropping the F-bombs. Thank you. So yeah, that was a good takeaway. I'm glad Mike spoke up at the end.
Yeah.
What do I think? Okay, so one thing to add, so it was also, what was it? Where we make money, we only monetize a very, very small part of the audience for IAPs. And I think that also startled him a little bit when he said that, just like, how can this be a business? And it's funny, after being for us being in this industry so long, that's just known. I just feel like I've accepted that as it is what it is. And what you try to do is get creative and work around it. And his other interesting comment was trying to monetize the middle class in terms of
the median LTV.
the median LTV.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's what you do.
Yeah.
How do we create that where you have these big spenders, small little group? What about the rest of them? And I feel like that was in my head. I was like, oh, this should be a great topic for our session for now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, people have gotten used to getting free stuff and playing games for free and watching shows for free. And this is sort of how it all works. Like, even from the days of like Romero and Carmack with Wolfenstein and Commander Keen and the shareware games, like you could get them for free and just play them for free. And on mobile, of course, it's just free to play. And just this concept of freemium where you get it for free and then you can buy stuff in the game has really taken hold. The problem is only a small percentage of people ever get their wallets out and make a purchase. And so you end up providing a game for free to a lot of people who just frankly can't be monetized anyway besides ads. And we got to remember that people don't play games to be monetized, of course, but game developers, I brought up Romero and Carmack for a reason. I want to go back to it because if you think about it, there are just so few ways for software developers and game developers to make money. And they put so much time and effort into building a title, and then that gets out there, and then you hope somebody will play it. But if people don't play it, then it dies. But if people play it and they don't pay you anything for it, that's awful. So there needs to be more monetization options for games.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I think the one thing that's probably baked into the assumption, or the assumption that's baked into the comment about the monetization model being bad, is the kind of assumption behind the lifetime of the game. And so depending on the kind of game that you have, certainly if you have long-term durable products, then switching from one to the other, time is limited, is sort of zero-sum in that sense. And from a wallet perspective, sure. But there are some games, like some hyper-casual games, where your ARD, your average retention days, is designed in a way that you actually want to ship players from one game to the other. And so And certainly some games that don't monetize themselves, the way in which that game would monetize is by shifting players to other games that monetize more strongly. So I think it depends on the situation, the kind of game.
It absolutely depends on the genre. There are a number of games. So when I was on TFT and we were looking at, the auto battler genre, it was very much like the CCG genre. And what we noticed when we really dug into the player behavior is that for those genres that require a lot of mental knowledge about your deck, it's cognitive load. I call it the Highlander syndrome. You only play one. There can be only one. It's a great movie from the 80s, everybody, and a TV show. I'm sorry if you missed it. Go back, you'll know what I'm talking about. So for those types of games, yes, you would probably never want to let another type of those games advertise inside of, not that Riot does it anyway, but you don't want to give away your players if you need to keep them inside. But for hyper casual, for maybe some puzzle games, there are genres where I call them the vacation games. Those are the types of games where you're going to go take a vacation in a hyper casual game and then come back to maybe your mid-core core game that you need to be a dedicated player.
Right, and the game itself may be actually designed as a feeder game. So for example, I would argue that a game like Stumble Guys that was acquired by Scopely, did they acquire that game for the game itself to be a highly profitable game, or was it acquired so that it could feed other games in the portfolio? So from a portfolio perspective, that may be a reason to have that game advertise other games, because that's the nature of the monetization for that specific game.
Well, that's interesting.
But you're talking about cross promotion, right?
I'm talking about cross promotion, and for a kind of game where the game itself, and I think that Scopely is, I believe I saw something where they're trying to make changes to Stumble Guys so that it itself is a game that can monetize.
Correct.
But I don't think it's there yet. And so for some of these games, they may be, because of the characteristics of the game, it may be designed to feed other games.
Oh, that's interesting. I know that that's one of the few games that is more admon than the other typical. Sure. And their casual games are a little bit more higher on admon. The mid-core are lower on admon and higher on IAP. But no, I like that idea because it's also a feeder for a younger audience. It's their game that truly hits that younger audience that they have, and it's almost like their Roblox competitor in a way, because every 12-year-old is playing Stumble Guys. Audience, again, raise your hands if you want to, if anyone has a take, because we're all friends. If not, okay. So another topic that kind of extends from this one was the idea of what came up a lot in your conversation and also earlier was incentivized. And this kind of goes back to by the way, incentivized and rewarded, an offer wall, all kind of generally mean the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just checking, because I feel like we're just rebranding stuff over and over, and rewarded is the new way to say incentivized, is kind of what I felt like today. But that topic felt like it came up as something of interest because everything else is so tried and true. With the idea of incentivized kind of coming back around and being a major topic, why do you think it's kind of coming around as being something that is interesting, that is getting a lot of conversation today, as kind of a new channel? Well, it's not really a new channel, but it felt like it had a little bit of a revival and a resurgence today in the conversation versus where it's been.
I think if you go back historically, and this one thing that I mentioned is that in the old days, and for some of the folks in the audience who are super old school, I think I mentioned that when I did speak to somebody from Tapjoy, when they first kind of innovated that model of incentivized traffic, that there was a point in time where on iOS, half of the installs were actually from incentivized traffic. And so certainly what we see is a model that can work. Now, Apple has put into place a policy so that you can't, they don't want that kind of behavior, right, on their platform. But I think we're in a space now, as far as trying to find alpha in the market, user acquisition being very difficult, that you need scale. And so where are you going to get scale? And so it makes sense that by figuring out a new model for driving user acquisition, and this model seems to work, and it doesn't seem to be currently being cracked down upon by the platforms, that to me makes sense.
I think there's part of it is that they're rebranding it so that they can stay away from Apple's coming down with a hammer. So I think it's only a matter of time that Apple says fuck all and cancels the whole thing. That's kind of my thing, because they hate that stuff. To the extent that it actually makes a difference or makes changes to the way people consume or download content on their platform, they're going to basically just cut it ultimately. That's what my concern is.
So I worked at Tapjoy. from 20.
You guys got canceled.
You're welcome.
You guys
Yeah.
literally got canceled. Like, and you're the first people to get canceled from Apple.
And I'm willing to say out loud, I worked at Tapjoy. I worked there from 2012 to 2015, and it was right after the heyday of, in order to even chart in the iOS app, in the App Store, you had to run ads with Tapjoy. You had to be on the offer wall. And burst campaigns were all the thing. People would get their credit cards out and they would sign up for a weekend burst campaign and get thousands of installs, paid installs. And those were the good old days, right?
Yep. I funded that house that you have wherever you live.
No, I got there later. I got there just after that. And we were working on tapjoy.com at the time, which was sort of our way to be one step ahead of the posse, basically saying, consumers, you can't do this on iOS, you can do it on Android. But in order to do it on iOS, you can go to tapjoy.com, and that's where you can get all the great offers to install, get a bunch of rewards, and then come back. And it's just a game about seeing if you can install something, and you might just get play it for a minute. You may never actually play it, but that install was helping these game apps chart. Of course, Apple hates that. They hated that. But while I was at Tapjoy, we innovated rewarded video. And that's the thing that's actually stuck. Rewarded video and rewarded rich media. And the thing about rewarded video and rewarded rich media is that it is the only way where players can actually get into the value exchange in a way that they really feel and understand it. We have this pretty tenuous connection as consumers to advertising. We know that ads are paying for the football game we watch and ads are paying for us to have access to content. But if we can avoid ads, we will. In a game that's rewarded, you actually, in Candy Crush, you opt in. You can choose to watch and engage with an ad. Whenever you do that, you get a reward. And it means that you're going to stand there and you're going to give your attention. And what we saw at Tapjoy, one of the main things we saw about rewarded video, technically we couldn't incentivize an install. So rewarded video was the thing. We could reward you for watching the video all the way to completion, but we couldn't reward you for doing the next thing. What we discovered is that as people watched the video, they became much more likely to install the game because video ads actually do work. Whenever you watch a video ad, you are learning about something and you're that consideration phase.
I thought it was interesting how, Kress, you politely challenged one of the gentlemen from what was it, King Cash? Thank you. I mean, I knew it was 2Ks, but you were talking to him like, isn't this kind of like a race to the bottom where as you keep now giving players real money or real prizes or real rewards, how do you stay afloat when the next guy has to give $10 and now you have to give $15
Yeah. So I did a deep dive on this because it's becoming an alternative way of acquiring users, and I wanted to see how much it could scale. And so one of the issues that keeps coming up is that, it's a race to zero in which you give more and more compensation to the player, and they're more and more incentivized as VCs get in and they want to optimize revenue growth and growth just at all costs. They're just going to keep throwing more and more money at the consumer, and therefore the profitability is going to go down for the rest of the players. So it's like, it is a race to zero, right? Because the barrier to entries are very low. But, I talked to him a little bit, and they differentiate themselves and sort of the types of offers they do and whatever. And they won't take that kind of business that they're not going to be losing money. But we've gone from 2 or 3 or 4 players in the last 2 years ago to 40, right? So it's only a matter of time before, the business model kind of falls apart, in my humble opinion. But there's a lot of other issues, right? There's a tech issue. There's the Apple issue. It's funny how everyone totally gaslights and doesn't talk about the big, bastard in the room, is that Apple completely destroyed this ecosystem in a matter of moments, in 6 months. But anyway, Apple and Google could come after these type of things at any moment, right? And just shut them down immediately, right? Because that's what they can do, right? I think Apple's eye is off the privacy ball because I don't think they give a shit anymore because they're going after AI and other stupid things. But, if they come back to the privacy thing, they could go after this. They could go after fingerprinting or whatever. Oh, and then scaling, right? So how many people are actually willing to sign up for these type of services, right? How many consumers in the US and tier 1 countries in the world are willing to sign up? How much can you scale this? It's never going to match the scale of Facebook or AppLovin or anybody else like that. So there's a certain limit to the amount of people that are going to be willing to pay for this type of service. So while there's a lot of people chasing this, I think there's a lot of risks associated with it long term. As the VCs start throwing money at it, then, it's a race to the bottom.
Yeah, it was interesting. And AppsFlyer, who's one of the sponsors of our podcast, has their like 17th annual tracking report out. And so I was, trying to understand which of the platforms kind of are ranking the highest. And there's something called, was it Games Light or Misplay is typically up there. And so these are the channels that they're starting to track differently, as incentivized channels versus like the traditional channels. Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting to see that this is floating to the top as something else.
For the record, Misplay evidently is minting money right now. So they are huge and they're making a lot of money. So if it's, I'm not saying if it's happening now, I think it's eventually.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that until somebody, the Eye of Sauron, like stares down and decides to like break it up, get in while it's hot, I guess. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Got a question on Incent. Yeah, question on Incent. Let's on a policy side, but okay, going back like mid 2010s. Incent's always been around, you know what it is, but it's mostly empty caliber. Coming in, they're all like, intrinsically not super motivated to play. You get your installs up, retention is bad. So I was like, okay, I tried it, but it's great for charting back in those days. But I think what's interesting with Incent is this resurgence. And I was like, the math is starting to work out for the first time in a long time. And I would love to hear from the panel, like what has changed? Why was it garbage before, but now it's like, yeah, things are changing. I'm just trying to figure out underneath what's going on.
So Incent was garbage back in the day. In today's world, it seems to be working. Panel, why is that, right?
Well, I think it's easy because I think before the objective was install. Now, that's against iOS policy at least, right? And so now the objective is an event, which could be defined by the studio. And so you have to go into the game and you have to actually engage with the game to some degree, which if the objective is just to install, you'll just install then uninstall. But here, because you actually do participate in the game, you might find that, hey, I actually like this match game or this whatever game that you're trying out.
Well, also, we get to set up what the reward is and when they get it. Yeah. And like, if you have a good data science team, they're figuring out what behaviors they can model to say the likelihood of a person getting to like level 30, that they're going to become a 30-day spender, and then their LTV is going to be good. You can set that all up so you can actually control all of that. So I feel like we got in there and we were like, all right, this has to change. What can we do? How do we make it work?
And by the way, that's not just for Incent. There's event optimization across, all of the platforms are allowing for it. And in many cases, that optimization tends to be better than, traditional ROAS modeling or ROAS or T-ROAS, whatever Google calls it. But yeah, I think the key, again, and we talk about one team, one dream on the podcast all the time, is how do you make sure that your UA team and your product team are identifying what those markers are, those events are, making sure that the tech allows you to track that, and then going and buying against that and seeing how it does. You can actually learn a lot about like the game itself from doing that.
Yeah. And I think the danger though is if you are assuming that these guys coming in and you set some kind of objective which they will likely achieve because they're incentivized to achieve it, but you're comparing that against a natural cohort that's not incentivized there, you might see, like, let's say you're optimizing for like some, D7 metric of some kind, and then you're assuming that that curve's going to continue because you're assuming that player's going to continue, but then they just finish their objective and now they're cashing out. Well, then you might get hosed, and those kind of assumptions.
Yeah, that's a fair point. You have to make sure that you understand and track the different cohorts differently from the install source, right?
Right, and you have to be able to actually be able to track.
Yeah,
which is not easy these days. Yeah, for sure.
So even back when I was at Tapjoy, we were incentivizing post-install. So you would install, and you would play to a certain point, and then you would earn your reward. And optimizing for that is indeed the right thing, because then you're getting people to actually play the game and experience it, and you have a much higher chance of getting somebody who's going to stay with the game long enough to make it worthwhile. One thing that we have gotten better at as an industry in the last handful of years since then is actually, we've been talking about machine learning since at least those days, but like in reality, we're finally getting really good at optimizing for these events, and the misplays of the world are going to have sophisticated data models. They're also going to have knowledge of those players. Like, these are essentially a known network of players that they have now, right? So they're going to do a much better job of matching players with games that they know the players are going to like, and doing a better job of like basically becoming a discovery vehicle for them.
Actually, that was the most interesting thing of the whole kind of project of looking at this, was that there are not many spenders in the US. Like you could probably estimate between 10, maybe 15, 20 million tops, right? In terms of people that spend actively on games. So if you can catalog those people, and a lot of these companies came off from the crypto bros, right? That had all these networks of people that they wanted to optimize and monetize. And so they threw them into their database and started doing misplay and other stuff. So at the end of the day, like if you are actually targeting and finding these customers and holding on to them, there is a value, huge value for that. So that was the one part that kind of like struck me as interesting, is that if you get all the spenders in the US, all the spenders in the UK, Germany, other tier 1 English countries, that's really, really valuable. Can you hold on to them though if they're getting incentivized from all these other people like trying to steal them from you? You know, that's the race to zero problem. So 100%. But as a UA channel, that's really optimal, right? If you can go after them. And what I heard from third parties or people that are using a service is that they get the best bang for their buck by spending on these type of display and others, but it just doesn't scale large enough to be a big part of the mix. So yeah, we'll see how it evolves. It's an interesting new kind of category for old new, whatever category.
Yes. And it seems like, to your point, which I think is the most powerful, sadly, is that you can't scale on these. So if you're a medium or a smaller size company, you know, it's really great. And maybe that kind of works for you, or maybe that's a way for you to kind of survive. But for, you know, the bigger companies that are looking for scale, this has always been the problem of even when I was back at Scopely, we were trying all of these different channels. It was like, yeah, but can it scale? And that was the problem.
Spending like 90% of their dollars on app level. So it's like, sorry, God.
Yeah, no, it's super hard. Yeah. Anything else on this topic?
Excellent.
Oh, yes.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. This has been really exciting. Sarah here. I lead a partnerships team over at Google, actually, and have been supporting a lot of apps and gaming teams, so probably know all of you guys through second degree to third degrees. I was just in the offsite kind of talking through a lot of the growth areas we want to kind of focus on for next year. And gaming is one area that we see as a lot of challenges, but also a lot of potential. One of the things that I think has came up is really thinking about, I think we talked a little bit about advertising on gaming partners, right? And really thinking about how do we really expand that from gaming advertisers to beyond gaming and brand spending potentially. So thinking through that, I'd love to kind of hear from those panel to see what's your thought on expanding beyond gaming from an advertising standpoint, and how do we think about, like, how might we represent ourselves in terms of different brands and agencies to really help in kind of drawing more dollars into the ecosystem?
Absolutely. So from an advertiser's perspective, the distinction between CTV and running a video ad in a game, like there is a distinction. Of course. And so what you want to do is you want to find advertisers who are advertising on CTV and show them that video ads in a game are similar. And how are they similar? Well, we have the same people. The people who play game X are also watching these shows, and you can find the same audience, and you can find them more predictably. Like there's all sorts of ways you can approach advertisers that way. The issue, though, goes back to the very first thing we talked about in the panel, which is the second a game decides to monetize with ads, even if they say at that moment they're not going to let game ads in, eventually all roads lead back to that, because performance advertising is where the money is. And so once it becomes a yield maximization exercise, then now you're looking at who's going to pay the most, where I get the highest eCPMs. And frankly, there's no higher qualified advertising opportunity in the world besides a game, advertising a game to a person playing a game while they're playing a game, right? And so this is highly, highly qualified, and it all trades on the same coin of the realm, a mobile advertising ID that's the same across the entire ecosystem. And so you can find your audience, you can exclude them, you can have the most sophisticated marketing teams in the world, I believe, work for UA for games. They have it on lock. So they're willing to spend a lot of money to get an install from a person that they believe is high value, and they have a really good understanding of who is high value. So a brand that wants to advertise toothpaste in a game is not going to pay the CPMs of a performance advertiser who knows they're going to find performance in the game. So you will get it, but you're going to have like this spectrum effect. And we have a decent brand business, I would say, where I work. But the fact is that comes, like, of course, the brand dollars compete against performance. And so you ask, like, where to go next. I think definitely other performance, like DTC or e-commerce. There's got to be other lead gen, mid-funnel objectives. Those are things, especially with the reward on top of it, could be very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, that's the number one problem is the difference in objectives from non-gaming partners, which is typically brand goals versus the performance deliverables. What I've seen in ads and why you see this directly right now is collaborations that are more deeply integrated into the brand experience. And so this is why you see SpongeBob and John Cena doing a Brawl Stars ad, or the cutest little baby pygmy hippo in a PUBG game. It was like the weirdest collaboration I've ever seen. But you're KFC in sponsoring events in esports, typically also a ton in Asia. And so you can understand that when you're a brand and you get to do an event for this moment in time and you get to be more seamlessly integrated into the experience where players get a lot of value, then the players are like, oh, cool, I'm getting this great game value, and now I have a positive association with the brand. Those are the types of experiences that are really a win-win. However, they are more complicated to do. They take more time and effort. You have to set those up. And so my recommendation of why I always talk about collaborations on the podcast is that's the future of this stuff, is programmatic in the game. I'm sorry, because I'm killing his business by giving this recommendation. If you're a brand partner outside of games and you want to how do I leverage this amazing audience of all of these different people? And then we're not even talking about Roblox or the UGC3, which is, Minecraft, which doesn't do ads yet, but, Roblox and UEFN. There's a massive, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles event that's about to go live in UEFN. And then on Roblox, holy shit, Sonic is a brand. Who played Sonic as a kid, right? Right? Do you know that is the number one game on Roblox right now, is Sonic of all the game brands? Because they have found a way to revitalize that entire brand within the branded ecosystem. And so there are games that are brands, and then there are also collaborations inside of Roblox. Laura, you need to talk about your Walmart Roblox, because she thinks the future is selling shit inside of Roblox. So
TikTok shop.
Yeah, how do you integrate TikTok into the TikTok shop? But the Walmart experience, you can buy actual products. There's Shopify integrated into Roblox right now. So Elf, I know nothing about makeup, but there's a makeup brand called Elf, right? Yeah, or is it called Elf? Or is it ELF? It has periods in it. Okay, good, thank you. You can actually buy products inside of Roblox. This is targeting kids, everybody. It's crazy that you're able to do this,
You never have to leave Roblox.
we don't have to leave. Yeah. I mean, so sorry, did we totally answer your question? I went off, as I typically do. I went off tangent. Yeah. All right. Yeah.
But no, I just get excited about talking about that. I feel like we don't talk about it enough. The old, I think you mentioned this earlier, that when Stumble Guys was kind of the gateway to other games, I actually thought you were going to say some games were designed not to be the gateway, were designed to kind of take a break. And that's how we used to do design. That's how we used to set the timers for lives refills, or we used to restrict things. Either you're going to pay or you're going to come back. And we know that less than 5% of players pay. So therefore they come back. And now it's this shift to, well, where is everyone? Let's look. So TikTok is one of if you actually look at where people are spending money in terms of revenue, it's moving it into apps. So TikTok's the number one. It was from a report on Sensor Tower. And it's the same idea that Roblox and Walmart are pairing together, because you go where people are staying, and the goal now is to get them to stay. It's how some of the design in game design has shifted. When we did the township breakdown, you never have to leave, and they don't want you to.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's why I'm hoping to see more conversations around what are we changing in terms of how we think of monetization, not just in terms of IAA or IAP, but what are the other crazy things we can do that some of the non-gaming, well, Roblox is a game, but some games, apps like TikTok are thinking about, get them to stay. You never have to go home. You can always just stay here. Yeah.
Oh, it's the best bar. Wait, not for children though. This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
Step into the future of game monetization with Xsolla, the premier partner for game developers seeking to expand their reach and revenue. Xsolla provides a robust suite of tools designed to enhance user acquisition, manage subscriptions, and streamline payment solutions worldwide. Unlock new markets and maximize profitability through their customized, secure payment architecture and dedicated support team. Xsolla, powering game developers to achieve global success.
I thought we would move to another topic that came up, which was how to survive in 2025 because it rhymes. And, here, Kress, this is one I think, we talk about a lot, which is it's harder to break through the clutter, feels like the bigger getting bigger, it's really difficult to survive. So what are some of the ways that you're looking at this and seeing this? Because it's really what we get asked about all the time. Is it okay to be small, to start a company? How do the little guys survive? Or do they?
Yeah, I've been kind of on a presentation tour. I went to Blizzard, I went to Epic, I was at Sony.
Confidentially,
Amazon.
he did all of those things, everybody.
both on mobile and console. And what's interesting is both mobile and console are kind of in this existential crisis right now where even though the market's growing pretty well this year for mobile, generally we're going to be at a 3 to 5% CAGR for the next decade, right? There's no new platform. There's no mobile, which is going at 20% CAGR for a decade, which is unprecedented in entertainment, by the way. So we're basically at the slow growth rate and we have winners and losers and it's a battle of the big, right? So big companies with big budgets like King and Scopely on mobile, and then obviously the big publishers on console with the AAA, the dying of the AA, and these are the type of things, these themes we're talking about. And it's getting mixed receptions, I'll be honest. A lot of people just don't want to hear that, right? Because we've been in this hyper growth rate for so long and the attention that was focused on video games, not only during the hyper growth rate of mobile, but also during the COVID time in which everyone was getting involved in gaming in some way. These venture capitalists coming out of nowhere with absolutely no experience, no knowledge, A16Z spending gajillions of dollars on bullshit, then we had blockchain, and I know we had a lot of Web3 people here. That was a complete disaster. So anyway, there's just a lot of money and attention on there, but now we're hitting this huge hangover, and we're at a slow growth market. Winners and losers, big guys are the only ones that can compete. It's gonna be a tough space. At the end of the day, that is what the problem is you can't compete, right? Monopoly Go, $500 million they spent in the first 8 months. I mean, that's insane. That's insane. Just 5 years ago, that's an insane number, And so, having said that, there have been things that are breaking through on mobile that are really interesting, where it's more casual type gameplay with deep monetization design. These 4X games that are disguised as runners and things like that. And I'm always going to forget the names of these games, but I've been writing about them.
Last War Survival, Whiteout Survival.
Yeah.
Whiteout Survival. Those type of games, that's very, very smart. But still, it's still very core, and they still have tons of money. It's not like they're struggling for money to pay for this thing. So, yeah, this is a big challenge for the industry moving forward, and that's kind of my hot, quick take.
Yeah.
I think that this, for me, is a particularly interesting topic, just because I do think we've seen a lot of layoffs, we've seen a lot of the industry contraction and a lot of negativity around the industry in general. But to the point that you made, it is because of the overhang, because of a Zerk environment, because of COVID and linear extrapolation from COVID. So I do think that what's happening now is a little bit healthy for the industry, but overall the industry is, we can argue about the growth rates, but it is growing. I personally have more of an optimistic perspective in terms of the outlook for the industry, because you could characterize the market in terms of the mobile games industry as only the big guys are winning. You don't really see that on the HD side, right? We've seen a Lethal Company, Valheim, BattleBit, Power. We've seen a bunch of small studios achieve #1 sales on Steam with very small teams, because these smaller teams have a better sense of player needs and market needs, and they're better able to address those market needs. Now, on the mobile side, I think there's something else happening. For example, when I was at Gamescom, there was a lot of negativity, but one of the things that we did see is that there was a dramatic shift from new games development to live ops and just trying to make existing games work. And so what we see now is we're clearly going to have a new games pipeline problem, right? And so even the bigger guys, when you look at 25, 26, they're struggling right now to figure out their new game pipeline. One of the other things that I think a lot about is that the industry hasn't changed very much. It's like the Darwinian notion of like the companies that are able to adapt to the environment are the companies that are going to survive. Well, we haven't seen bigger companies adapt. And so we still have like these large monolithic game development processes at these bigger companies. We've seen the big flops, whether it's Concord, WB's Justice League, whatever, the Suicide Squad, $200 million loss, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing like these huge game development projects that are based upon, let's make a better version of this, let's scale up this big team, and 8 years later, we're gonna launch something with the sort of vision of the game being developed by a lot of big company executives who don't know jack shit about games, right? And so what we're seeing on the HD side is we're seeing these small developers that really understand the market, that are able to achieve product market success to scale, but they suck at live ops, so those games sharks in. And on the mobile side, I actually think we're gonna see a lot more opportunity. There are so many structural changes that have happened in our industry, whether it's ZERP, whether it's upcoming things like AI and other things. And so my prediction is that there's gonna be a new class of smaller companies that are able to successfully adapt to the market, to deliver products that are better adapted and not just, again, you can't use MBA thinking to develop hit products for mobile, which is what's being tried over and over and over again. And then we sit here as an industry and be like, okay, here's another $100 million, $200 million game that failed. Gee, I wonder what went wrong, right?
You've got a lot. Kress he's going to explode right now.
Sorry, I want to agree with you. I want to shoot all the consultants. I think Bain and McKinsey, go the fuck home. Get away from gaming. If any of you guys for Bain and McKinsey, please go away. Anyway, no. So I agree with that point, but I disagree with the idea that these small publishers or developers can compete. And things like Palworld is like kind of a false flag, right? So Palworld was built, like they started in 2015, they copied Zelda, that game failed, then they used leveraged all that tech, built Palworld, got a bankroll from Microsoft, right? That's not reported.
Upwards of 7 million.
No. 7 million was the investment, but there's like 20 million or more put into this game after the fact from Microsoft, which wasn't reported. And they copied an IP, right? So they didn't even build their own game, right? They just copied Pokemon, right? So yeah, sure. That game was successful for a hot minute, but that doesn't bode well for success because, to your point, which I agree with, is that they can't support the game after the fact to keep players engaged, which is a problem not being big enough, right? So I do think it's a battle of big, but what I would argue is that this is a feature, not a bug, right? The fact of the matter is, when you get to a mature part of an industry, particularly when it comes to entertainment, it is a battle of the big, right? Before Netflix and the rest of these streaming services, it was like 4 major studios or 3 major studios and 4 major movie studios, right? That was it. And you got the same shit over and over and over again. And you guys ate it up, right? With the Marvel and everything else. But when Netflix came and changed the game, then options were, abounded, right? So same thing with mobile, right? When mobile came out in 2010, 12, everybody was part of that. It was amazing. People were throwing anything out there to see what sticks, King had like 20 games that they threw out there, of which only one was really that successful, And so it's like that's just the way this market matures, right? That's just the situation that we're in. And I think what COVID did, and what I was trying to say before, is that it changed expectations because there's so much buzz and hype and investment from people that don't know anything about games into the space. It created this artificial bubble that we're still kind of reeling from right now.
And one of the ones that burst today, the news, is that Team Blue, which is the AAA development team at Netflix, who had been working on a massive shooter game, new IP, for 2 years with some of the biggest industry leaders, got shut down today.
Yeah, 30 people making like $1 million salaries. I mean, it's like ludicrous, right? It's insane, right? It was insane back then. I talked about it on the podcast. Netflix investing in a AAA game makes no sense. It doesn't make any sense. And Mike Perdue, I know him for Command days. I don't know what the hell they were thinking. And so
if you're Netflix, you're trying to get as much of the 24 hours that everyone has, right, in a day. They're going to sleep for 8 hours, but then they have 16 hours left. How many of those are spent on Netflix?
Sorry, I agree with that. What I'm
Yes.
saying
I'm
is,
not saying they'll be successful at it, but I think you could see why that somebody would want to try.
no, yes and no. They should lend to them strengths, right? Their strengths is they have this huge network of people that are engaging with their TV app or their mobile app, build games to service them. You don't build things outside of your ecosystem.
100%. Yeah, so
That's what didn't make
That's-
sense.
we actually did an exercise about a year ago. I was leading a strategy session for a bunch of product managers at Candy Crush in Stockholm. And we did a strategy exercise around, okay, you're the product lead for Netflix gaming. What are you going to build? And the only thing we could come up with, like in this group of 60 people all talking about it, was if they came up with games that reinforced their own IP in a way that allowed them to extend while they're waiting for season 6 of Stranger Things, if there was a game you could play and engage with to keep you in that and then go back, like that would be a really valuable thing.
Yeah, like interactive stories.
But that's about it.
Too Hot to Handle, Money Heist. They tried
The
that.
interactive story.
What was driving me insane? I know people that work there, and they were telling me that this is what they were working on, but yet all this PR was around nonsense. And it's less than the podcast. So mobile, spending $50 million on GTA to throw it on mobile so they get some downloads that people play for like 10 minutes and then drop it, right? None of that strategy made sense, but they are working on these type of interactive experiences that could expand interactive and make an interesting play into mobile for Netflix. And then the other one I want to mention is Steam. So Steam is really a false flag to some degree, right? All the growth is in Asia, right? So 50% of the MAU that they talk about in terms of growth is all in Asia. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that. EA, Ubisoft, Take-Two, Capcom, all are benefiting from the fact that there's a new audience that you can monetize in China, right? Which is great. But it's totally illegal, right? It's gray market. The Chinese CCP could come after them at any moment and shut it down. Now, they're not for whatever reason, but that market is tenuous at best, right? And so when something like Wukong is successful, it's about Chinese game made by a Chinese developer with a Chinese theme, right? That's what works in China, right? So that's going to be successful. But you're not going to be able to just port anything and expect it to be successful in China with these, 50% of the audience on Steam. So there's a lot of misreporting about what's going on with that. Now, the PC market is growing, like in Japan, there was a report there. I think it's doing well in Asia, obviously in China, obviously, but also in Europe and North America. But still, it's 10,000 games a year, right? It's impossible to get discovered. Like people are losing their ass on Steam. I'm out there talking to these developers on a regular basis. It's not fun for them, So I question some of those metrics as well. So again, I think, we're at a stable growth rate. The big have a huge advantage, and it's going to be a real challenge going forward.
Just one comment on Netflix. I think the interesting thing for me about Netflix's game strategy is that my understanding of the objective behind the games team at Netflix is as a reaction to Fortnite. That, the CEO was, Reed Hastings was like, we realize that Fortnite is stealing time away from Netflix.
Exactly.
And so we want to make games. But then I would then question, why make all these small, little, tiny games if the real fear is a game that has extremely long-term durability and engagement, right? I would almost say like the strategy should be like a few teams that are extremely high quality that are working on these like huge hits rather than having some of these small hits.
I understand why Netflix would invest in something like that.
Okay.
But I don't know how they would guarantee success. You'd be swinging every single time and you'd hope you'd hit something because it's still catching lightning in a bottle. And it doesn't matter how high quality the game is, really, it's one of the most important things, necessary but not sufficient, most likely, right?
Yeah, I just think like from an objectives perspective, there's like, okay, we're trying to react to Fortnite, but then it's like, well, how do we leverage our assets and what we have to make games? Which
then it
seems to
just-
be two different things.
It comes down to right to win. Does Netflix have the right to win against Fortnite on Fortnite's turf? I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah.
I don't think they could
Yeah,
acquire
no.
something that might, but like, will they have what it takes to do it? Like,
And how does that
don't think
reinforce
so.
their own
It-
subscrition?
It's
like, if it's
It's
something
apples and
outside, it doesn't even
oranges.
make sense. None of it makes sense.
no,
It's, I guess what's so frustrating is these people, these director level people are making like 800, maybe I'm just jealous, right? They're making $800,000 a year for doing what? Nothing. I mean, it's crazy. None of them will talk to me either, like friends of mine that I've known for like decades because
Yeah,
they don't
they run
wanna-
away from us.
They don't want to get off the teat of the the money that they're getting. Hey, I'm not rocking the boat, Sorry, this is not meant to be a flex, but I was getting a call from the Wall Street Journal this weekend about what was happening with this AAA team getting canceled. And I'm like, look, there's no way any of my friends will ever talk to me about this because they're worried about losing their, $600,000 job, so sorry, I can't help you. But anyway, the news came out anyway.
That's a big flex. We're coming up on time. Just to give you guys a chance to ask anything that is off topic, go for it.
Hi, yeah, I'm Tiffany. On this Netflix topic, it seemed like you guys were in agreement that trying to make these smaller games that are just tiding people over until the next season comes out, like that can be their biggest strength. But yet we see maybe like 1% of their base actually downloads these games. So what's really the sticking point there on actually getting their install base to engage with the content that is designed for them? Or what about using their games for things like a way to further their own product marketing for the series that they plan on doing next? When you look at the IPs that they have to leverage, when we see them leveraging them, for some reason, it's actually not creating stickiness.
Well, the inside baseball that's going on is that the gaming group, and I wrote a piece on this on LinkedIn if you ever want to read it, but the gaming group gets no leverage at all in the organization, right? It's all set up to service the movie and television guys, right? And so they have I think it's 150 team of strategy people that are all talking about how to optimize the network, and gaming gets this much attention, right? So this is the problem, right? It just hasn't been elevated enough. And it's just a traditional problem with traditional media and gaming in general, is that they just don't get the attention. So, and I just don't think they've had the product that actually would justify the investment, frankly. I think interactive stories based upon their existing IPs or whatever would be something that would be interesting. Things did well was Oxenfree, and I'm forgetting there's one other one that did really well for them.
Storyteller,
from an engagement perspective. And the real inside baseball stuff is they're optimizing around metrics that make no sense for interactive. It's they're looking at God dang it, I forgot the name of it, but you get points for every time they interact with the content on a weekly basis up to 4 weeks or 5 weeks or something like that. So they're just optimizing around this really short window to keep people engaged with content. And they're using the same rubric they do for movies and television on games, which doesn't make any sense either. But that's the way they think. That's the way the whole organization is set up.
This other thing about the way the org is set up, so it's all about discovery. Nobody can find any of the games. Every time I talk to a layperson, they're like, there are games on there? Where are they? I've never seen it. And so the gaming group and the group that builds the way to surface and discover the apps, they're different groups. And so when the gaming group's like, hey, product team, can you? And they're like, no, you are a priority. Come back in 2 years when I get through all of these other things on my roadmap. And so all of this goes back to the earlier conversation about how Tapjoy, the reason why people use Tapjoy was to get your game up to the #1 ranking in the App Store, because rankings mattered back in the day. Because on Apple, before they got rid of rankings, every player would see that and it became a flywheel. And so Netflix doesn't even have anything close to what the App Store is today that we all even shit on. I would even take the shitty Discovery Today tab on the Netflix app, and that's shit. So there was a new ad on the Today tab, and so I was asking the community, hey, is anyone seeing anything? Because it looks like you can actually buy an ad in the Today tab, and they were like, nope, still sucks. And so Discovery is, I think, their #1 problem, and then internally they have no way to rectify that. So.
Many of these large game companies, with Candy Crush, people work at Activision, people talk about our biggest competitor is another game. It's Netflix, it's YouTube, because we're competing outside.
Share time, yeah.
Yeah, so does Netflix actually consider gaming this way?
Absolutely.
And if that's what they're looking at, of who can eat up that share of time is actually games like Candy Crush, why don't they care more about prioritizing it?
I mean, the fact that they're investing hundreds of millions of dollars on nothing right now, they're just blowing money. I mean, that's, at least they're committed, right? They hired a new guy.
Well, and new guy, the Epic guy, I forgot his name, has come in, and what did he do? He shut down.
Yeah. The one key thing from an investor perspective, just so you know, is that when the Netflix guys, the management go after something, they never stop, right? This is not like Google, which gives up after 3 years and abandons all of them. No, I mean, that's what Google does. I mean, that's just fact, right? So, and you saw it with Stadia, right? 3 years out, right? But the Hastings, they don't mess around. They will keep going and going and going. And they're going to just do it until it. And I was wrong about this in my piece, is that they were going to give up on gaming. But After this 3 years from now, I think they probably will give up.
One thing that I saw from
Finally get it.
from the inside of like these companies, right, was that I used to think that a lot of these decisions were top down. And in reality, though, I think some percentage of things like whether games will win or lose at a place like Netflix comes down to product engineering teams seeking impact because they want to work on the most impactful things. I mean, the best engineers at Amazon aren't working on Alexa right now because they chose not to. And the same thing is probably true for other things that we all thought were going to be important, but it's just not where the impact is. You can't be promoted. You're not going to have you can take a different track if you stay in something like that.
Yeah, I think that's more relevant for technology companies like Google.
Yeah, it's super relevant for technology, for Google and Facebook, for sure.
I think the strategy for Netflix is more high level, like more tops down. I constantly am bagging on Apple if anyone ever listens to the podcast, but like the privacy thing that they did had nothing to do with the store. It had nothing to do with anybody.
Trying to rope-a-dope Google into caring about privacy.
Yeah,
and they
rope-a-dope the customer. Like no one gives a shit about privacy. I mean, who's giving a crap about privacy even from the customer level? They had to convince the customer to care, to differentiate themselves from Google, and then they throw this privacy shit at us and destroy the ecosystem for no fucking reason besides selling a few more phones. And now they've moved on, right? They don't care anymore about privacy, right?
They did hire a bunch of DSP product management engineers. Like they are building an ad product of some kind.
Right.
Well, they have ASA, which is that's a grift.
They just wanted to stick it to Facebook. I mean, come on, let's be real. They lost control of their store. I mean, they have all these IGN guys making stupid like editorial on their store. I mean, the whole thing is a disaster, as we know. So back to the point. A lot of these things are so tops down, and that's actually what we talked about on the podcast. Oh, one of the reasons is EA here still?
Yeah.
Oh, so the reason I said this on the podcast a million times, and this is total truth as far as in my mind anyway, the way my mind works. The reason that EA continues to fail on mobile is because Andrew fucking hates mobile, right? So they will never succeed in mobile because they will never make the appropriate investments to actually be successful in mobile. And that's why EA has built over and over and over and over again. The Glue acquisition was a disaster. So like at the end of the day, like these top level decisions are made, and the ego, like maniacal, like nonsense from the top is what kind of makes these decisions, and this trickles all the way down to ecosystems. Steve Jobs was the first, right? He made lots of interesting decisions on his history at Apple. So
all right, should we start to wrap, Josh and team here? I'm just,
Sorry, I have one end to the thought experiment. So let's say we make them care. They find that Netflix's subscriber churn, big reason they want to do games, right, is if games actually can be linked back, which are unable to make money, to solving their subscriber churn issues because they're stuck in these games endlessly. Then would they care? Was that like the linchpin to getting them to truly invest? Or do you think it would need to be something else?
No. If they solve a churn issue, like even by a fraction of a percent, like that's huge money for them. I have heard specifically that Oxenfree and other games have actually shown that they've had the performance that, you can manipulate the number. Some like super nerd geek can figure this stuff out with, like some SQL nut, right? But like, and so like that's all they need to prove, and then they will keep investing forever, right?
Yeah, the ones that are working in their definition are the games that are based on their IP, the more interactive stories. Now, the challenge, everyone know what the interactive stories, basically it's like, and anyone know Skinamax, that phrase? So it's basically like a softcore for porn in story mode. So number one is it's creepy. And then number two is it's really, really expensive to actually produce that kind of content. It's the content treadmill. Many of us know what this is. And so their whole like approach right now is, how do I do more of that against the IP that we know resonates? By the way, and mostly women are interacting with that. And how do we do that as cheaply as possible, as quickly as possible? Because that is the thing that is working. They're struggling to get more of the traditional male gamers, traditionally in those other genres, to participate. Like double down on what's working, and that's why you see, again, the AAA studio is now no longer there.
It's going to get cheaper. There's no way. This is where AI can.
AI is good. Oh my God.
Didn't talk about AI.
This is the big. I mean.
Thank God.
Yeah. Well, I skipped that one. Although we were very impressed with Black Box and what.
That was cool.
There's Replay, and there's other companies that are doing the, how do you take UA creative, have AI go in and cut up the parts and pieces and recreate ads and automatically test it, well done. That's brilliant shit. If you're not already talking to those kinds of companies, then you should be right away, because this is like truly game changing in the world of how AI is benefiting marketing. Okay. Should I really wrap up this time? Because you probably want to go home. All right. Thank you, everyone. It was like JK, Matt, thank you for joining.
Thank you.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry's best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand. Or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.